Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Simon Bosher. I'm the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation, and this is a Traffic and Transportation decision meeting. A couple of things before we start the meeting. Firstly, a bit of good housekeeping. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery. By the stairwells, please don't use the lifts, and please assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in the front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who's signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should remember to sign out when leaving the building after today's meeting. If in doubt, follow me because I'll be the first one out the door. Secondly, can I draw everybody's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed, filmed, from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, which is directly above Councillor Tompkins' head. And it will be on the council website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of anybody giving deputations, but there will be some footage of them as you approach and as you leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room. Welcome, Councillor Chowdhury. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meetings on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. When you come to the table, could you make sure that you use the microphones provided when you're actually speaking? Okay, before we go any further, let's make a few introductions around the table so that everybody knows who we are. You know who I am. We'll start on my left. Okay, and on my right?
I'm Joan Walsmith, Democratic Services, doing the minutes today.
Anne Turton, Assistant Director for Transport.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Louise Wilders, Director of Community and Communications.
Gina Perryman, Access and Equality Advisor.
Thank you very much, everybody. I gather Councillor Stagg is probably joining us when she gets here. First item on my agenda I have is apologies, which I think is just Councillor Stagg coming late. The second I have is declaration of members' interests. I have none. Do you have any? No, thank you very much. Now, I'm going to vary the running order of my agenda because I think as we have some people that have come to give deputations, we'll hear the issue that's affecting you first, which I believe is agenda item 6, which is Slingsby Close double yellow lines. Okay, now I have some deputations. I've got a Mr. Robert Bosshart, is it? And Mrs. Angela Bosshart, Mr. Bob Williams, and I have a late request from a Mr. Lawrence Bacon. Thank you. If you'd like to approach the table and take a seat. That's fine. So that means I've got. So you are Mr. Williams, is Mr. Williams, Mr. Bacon. So we have. Is it 6 minutes each? Right. So, gentlemen. Effectively, you have 12 minutes or 6 minutes each, but how you do it is entirely up to you. Okay, Mr. Williams, the floor is yours.
Well, I hope I won't be taking much of that 6 minutes' time, Mr. Bosher. As I said, I've been asked to just speak on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Rob Bosshart. I should make clear, I think, only to be fair, I'm not a resident of Slingsby Close. Right. However, I did live in Pembroke Park for some 14 years, so I know the the area quite well. And as I say, I'm here just to represent the views of Mr. and Mrs. Bosshart, and I think I can put it fairly straightforwardly, in as much as they support the report that has been produced for this meeting by Mr. Samuels. I think a very comprehensive report. And it's all summed up, I think, within that report. If I could just make a few points on it. And perhaps if I could start off with the rationale for double yellow lines, as I and Mr. and Mrs. Boshart believe them to exist. And I think that's set out in paragraph 4.2.1 in the report. And the reasons for double yellow lines normally are for the purpose of road safety, which obviously I suspect must be the priority in any case. So there's for the purpose of road safety, managing traffic, and for the benefits of motorists. And perhaps I can make it quite clear at this point that that seems absolutely logical, and how the report has been written would suggest that none of those matters seem to come into play here. Slingsby Close, I'm sure you've been thoroughly briefed on this, is not a thoroughfare. It has no through traffic. There are no line of sight problems, for instance, for people manoeuvring in Slingsby Close. And no logical evidence, I suggest, has been produced to support the need for this proposal. In fact, I have a photograph which perhaps might be helpful to you. It was taken off Google Maps. Makes you realise how much we're under scrutiny these days. Would you like me just to...
By all means, yeah.
I'll pass it up.
I'll pass it down. Thanks.
There we go.
Lou.
There we go. Thank you very much indeed. As I say, perhaps an independent and impartial source of information, and I would suggest that shows a normal state of play for Slingsby Close. As I say, as far as the rationale for having double yellow lines in any one place, there's no thoroughfare there, as you can see, no through traffic, no line of sight, as I've said, and I would suggest no safety issues to be dealt with, and no logical evidence to support the proposal to put forward double yellow lines. As for objections that have been lodged, you've had an opportunity, I'm sure, to see them all.
Yep.
So I won't reiterate those. There doesn't seem to be an overall consensus for there being double yellow lines. In fact, most of the people here today, I think, are against that proposal. And so what isn't clear as well is on what basis is the application actually made, not on the lines that I've already covered, I suspect, as Mr. Simon would have covered those in his report. And what I would suggest is that if this proposal was to go forward, there would be quite a detrimental effect on Mr. and Mrs. Boshart, because that would limit the ability of carers to come and visit Mr. and Mrs. Boshart's elderly mother, who they now look after. So if this proposal was to be accepted, and I know the recommendation is that it's not, which is supported obviously by Mr. and Mrs. Boshart, if it was to be taken forward, then they'd be out of all proportion to any benefits to anybody. In fact, it's not obvious what benefits there would be. No survey has been carried out, and I believe that there is a proposal for a survey to be undertaken within the next year or so of parking in the whole of the Pembroke Park area. And perhaps, if there was a need, then this proposal could be revisited again.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bacon.
Good afternoon. We have lived in Slingsby Close since January '74, probably one of the eldest in that area. We object to this application on the basis that the objections from one resident, one lady we believe, she does not drive. there is no need for this, basically, because it is on her part, in my view, is that it's a continued persecution of the family at number 8 because of them trying to provide and succeeding in providing accommodation for their aged mother. There is no enforcement carried out, so what is the point of putting lines down, particularly across driveways? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have had some written representations, some in favour and some against. So we're almost at a 50-50 from what I've actually had in favour and those against it. I'm guessing, Mr. and Mrs. Bosshart, you live at number 8, correct? And so that's that one. And Mr. Bacon, number 4.
Number 4.
4, 6, yeah. Okay, so a couple of doors down. That's right, just for my curiosity with my little bit of green and red dotted bits of paper that I've actually got in front of me. Now, perhaps what I should have done before we even started, perhaps, Pam, you can just give me an overview of what we've done and where we're going.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, this report brings the responses to the traffic regulation order, which proposed to install double yellow lines at the eastern end of Slingsby Close. The order was consulted upon following complaints from one resident regarding parking within the cul-de-sac area of Slingsby Close. During the consultation period, we received 4 objections to the proposal, the grounds for which are outlined in section 4.1 of the report and have been very well articulated by the deputies this afternoon. Pembroke Park is on the residents' parking programme to be surveyed in 2019, which possibly should be taken into account as you make your decision, and that will determine the levels of support for residents parking in the future in that area. Because of that, and because of the objections that we received, we've recommended that the proposal for double yellow lines is not implemented and that further proposals are not pursued at this time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chowdhury, you got any comments to make?
Not really. I think we've got objection 50-50.
Firmly on the fence then. I have to say, when I looked at the proposals, the double yellow lines that were proposed on the map that I have in front of me, and I've actually been down to Slingsby Close and actually had a look as well. Welcome, Councillor Stagg. Do you have any declarations of interest before you sit down?
No interest whatsoever, especially in transport today. The second time we've been...
Are you blaming me for the traffic? Are you blaming me for the traffic?
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought you might be. Okay. You don't praise me when it runs nicely, though.
Yeah, no, to be fair, yes. I know the buses are good, but this didn't appear. And oddly enough, I passed on a couple of bridges. So it must have taken a different route.
Well, there you go.
Bizarre.
The world knows we're on live stream at the moment.
Oh, are we?
Yes.
Declarations of interest.
Never mind,
But you've got no declarations of interest. Fantastic. Well, we're actually going to item 6, Slingsby Close, at this moment in time, first, because we have some deputations, just to keep you in the loop. But say, coming back to it, I went down there and had a look at Slingsby Close. I've been down there at least twice and had a look. Once when we met with some residents down there, and I wandered down there of my own volition on one occasion as well, just to have a wander and get myself acquainted with the area. My mind's eye, cars shouldn't be actually parking in what is effectively a turning circle anyway, on that basis. But having said that, what was actually being proposed here does seem somewhat overkill for a situation as far as I'm concerned. My other issue is that the centre part of Slingsby Close, sort of outside numbers 2 and 4 perhaps, is quite narrow, and there's no parking restrictions on either side of the road there. If we put in, by all means, we don't normally allow it, but under the circumstances that, if we put in double yellow lines at the hammerhead, anybody that's parking, it's going to drive it back into the close, I would have thought, to sort of like outside 2 and 4, 3 and 5, and that sort of area where it's reasonably narrow. If we have a situation where that happens and they park on both sides of the road, are emergency vehicles, refuse vehicles, etc., going to be able to get down Slingsby Close? Because I don't think they will if we restrict the parking at the end. I think there was a question in there somewhere.
Certainly, it is a narrow road, and I think that, so we haven't actually measured it specifically, but I think that there is a general feeling, and that's represented in some of the written deputations that we've had kind of latterly, is the fact that it is quite narrow, and there has been a concern raised that on that particular part of Slingsby Close that kind of parallel parking on either side of the road would make it difficult for vehicles to pass through. But as I say, we haven't actually measured it, but certainly that's the information we're receiving in the deputy.
There's also, in some of the representation, the fact that in favour of putting in the parking restrictions, that they get a lot of people that are either using the hovercraft or whatever, or going to the Isle of Wight and stuff, using the close as a convenient free car park for days on end, which probably causes a degree of frustration. Personally speaking, I'm not minded to go with the double yellow lines as they are proposed, but I think there is going to be a parking issue there of some description. When we go down the RPZ route, that's obviously going to be the whole estate that gets surveyed. And I'm quite mindful of the fact that Slingsby is quite close to the entrance to the estate, isn't it? So therefore, one would think that any non-residential parking is likely to fill up in the likes of Slingsby rather than go further back into the estate. So projecting it forward, looking at RPZ, you may well find that people at the front of the estate around the entrance might be in favour of it, but further back into the estate, probably not so, because they don't see it as an issue. But I suppose that's one for a toss of a coin next year, isn't it? Yeah, it is next year now. What other course of action do we actually have open to us on this one, Pam? Because I don't want to push the traffic back other than the recommendations, but I understand that hammerhead needs to be kept clear.
I think on the basis of the fact that a number of the deputations have raised concerns about the narrowness of the street and the potential issues caused by the parking on both sides of the street, we could go again out to an informal consultation with residents and looking at in a more holistic way what the issues are there, and work with the residents to come up with a solution that would meet everyone's needs, hopefully. And so that essentially would change the recommendation that we've, if your mind is still about the double yellow lines, as you seem to be suggesting, it would change the recommendation 2.2, where we've said that further proposals for additional double yellow lines on one side of Slingsby Close are not progressed. We could certainly look into whether or not there is an alternative solution that the residents would be happy to accept. And that could be done on an informal basis initially before progressing to a traffic regulation order, which would hopefully give all residents an opportunity to give their views and feedback.
Because with effect, double yellow lines mean you don't park there, end of, unless you've got something like a disabled badge, which case you can do that. There are variations on a theme where there could be a single yellow line in some aspects of it, which would perhaps not impact on Mr. and Mrs. Bosshart quite as much, but it would certainly remove the necessity for Isle of Wight visitors perhaps parking at the end of the close for several days at a time, so it'll actually free up that space. I think on balance, I'm not going to proceed with the double yellow lines. because I think it's going to have a material impact further down the road, or the close, I should say. But I think it is probably fair and reasonable to both the objectors and the supporters that we perhaps do actually look at the close in its entirety to see whether there is a solution. It may well be that the solution is to do nothing and leave it as it is, but to look at the whole thing to see whether there is something workable going forward. Now, I appreciate that means a little bit more consultation work, but I think we need to look at addressing both the needs of the local residents, the style of the road it is, and perhaps addressing the issue that has come up, which is non-visitor vehicles, shall we say, using it as an extension for free parking for the seafront and stuff like that, as a means to perhaps improve the situation down there a little bit. Okay, so on that basis, recommendation 2.1, WLO lines are not installed at this time, primarily due to the objections from residents, but also the lack of evidence to show Slingsby experienced exceptional congestion issues due to on-street parking. I will go with that recommendation. And we are suggesting that 2.2 recommendation is replaced, that we look at a further survey work with the residents in the area to see whether there is something that we can do that will mitigate any issues going forward at the same time. Which I'm afraid might mean a little bit more consultation work, but hopefully we can shape something that actually suits the residents a little bit more than that, which I think is a little bit overkill in its current form. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. That was item 6. You're very welcome. Okay, let's go with agenda item 3, community transport review. This is an information report. Lou, Gina, if you'd like to introduce for me, please.
Thank you, Chair. So a bit of context around this report. We, as Community and Communication Directorate, were asked to undertake a review using partners in the third sector to look at the provision across the board of transport in the city for people who would historically been users of the dial-a-ride service in its many iterations for the number of years it was run. This was following a decision by the organisation that was running it at the time to pull it out in May 2017, I believe. So basically what was happening at the time is that with discussions with the officers, there was a decision to put into place a temporary bus service, whilst we undertook a review, like I say, with colleagues in the voluntary and community sector, as to the impacts and what sort of provision could be provided, and indeed whether or not there should be a provision provided potentially by the voluntary sector and other partners. What we did is asked Age UK Portsmouth and Portsmouth Disability Forum to undertake some surveying and some consultation, and to undertake separate reviews looking at different things. Age UK Portsmouth was looking at various options both in the city and around the country, provisions including sort of the community first provision that's elsewhere in Hampshire, things like Uber Assist and other options like that. And Portsmouth Disability Forum did a review of transport across the city in terms of, from a disability perspective, and people who have trouble normally moving around, as to how the transport provision in terms of buses, public transport, etc., was in this day and age. From the information that was received, I should add as well, that as part of that review, and as the review started, Age UK, Portsmouth, who had quite a few customers using the service at that time, interviewed and, if you like, handheld discussions with the people that were using the service at that time or had previously used the dial-a-ride service, and have assisted them into different modes of transport, which have actually largely increased their independence and the ability for them to attend not only functions at Age UK Portsmouth, but in other places at other times, and that perhaps suited them better. This report really is, as you say, for noting, but I think that the striking thing from it is that the organisations are both minded to suggest that transportation across the city now in terms of public transport is vastly improved than what it was certainly 30 years ago when the first community transport schemes were put into place. And in fact, in the probably last 5 to 10 years with changes to equality legislation. And that there is quite a few good initiatives going on, and in line with people, in particular public health and our CCG colleagues, things like the Good Neighbourhood Scheme, which is working really effectively across Hampshire with over 4,000 volunteers, is being introduced into Portsmouth. And that is actually benefiting people with a far more holistic and supportive role than just a straightforward, pick up and drop and spend a period of time on the bus. So basically, it's a report for noting. The findings have come from Age UK Portsmouth and from Portsmouth Disability Forum, and it's really, I think there's a few comments that I would draw your attention to around things such as potentially the need to provide better training and support to our licensed taxi holders, and perhaps a greater implementation of ensuring that people aren't parking in bus stop areas, so that the buses, when they turn up, can actually drop significantly enough for people to be able to use them. But apart from that, it's really for noting. I don't know if Gina wants to add anything.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lou. Comments? Yes, Lou.
Which one do I press now?
The one on the black one on the
Good,
right.
thank you. I've got a few concerns. Not the survey itself, because I think the survey itself is fine, but I don't think it's reached the parts that it needs to reach, not like Heineken, And I think that the people who are using Dial-A-Ride are the ones who are outside of the norm. Now, Dial-A-Ride have done some research of their own. They've sort of contacted some of their users. I think they've only done about 60 so far. They've only found one person, apparently, who's done this survey. So that leaves 59 who haven't sort of been contacted. And the range of responses they've got, I've got to say this for data protection, they've allowed me to share the information because obviously they've done it themselves. They said that they use it for a variety of things, such as shopping, going to the doctor, hospital, day centres, social clubs, community centres, etc. And the thing that they miss more than anything else is the extra care that the driver gave them, like checking before they get into the bus that they've got their key to get back in afterwards, making sure they go into the house, they're in safely. So that's sort of thing. A heck of a lot of them, I mean, I am saying only out of 60 people or thereabouts, some of them do not go, they're now totally housebound because they can't access, they don't have either confidence or the ability to access. And I think the rest of it, I think you're right about the improved services, with buses. I mean, I've just come on the bus, even though it was very late. But, with the floor going down, it's great seeing people in wheelchairs coming in and out. But there's that section, I think, of the community that is not covered by this, partly because they haven't done the survey. And I realise that you had problems there because you asked for details and they weren't handed over. But it strikes me that people who are suffering shouldn't be suffering because somebody hasn't given in the information that they were asked to give in. So I have major concerns about that. But the rest of it, fine.
Lou, when Dial-A-Ride effectively handed back the keys, did we approach the operators for their list of users, and what was the outcome of that?
Yeah. Okay, so my understanding was that we approached the operators on more than one occasion for the list of users. We offered which was similar to what they were given when they actually took the dial-a-ride, Pompey dial-a-ride, I should say, rather than the original dial-a-ride, over, which so the offers were, can we, obviously under data protection, get your permission, or can you get their permission to pass on the information, including offers of us actually providing a letter and all the expenses for them to send letters out to people saying, we are intending to run stuff, we need to talk to you, not only in terms of we're intending to run a temporary solution, because clearly we didn't want people to be left out on the limb, but also in terms of, you know, we want to talk to you about what your needs are. Because these sorts of people that Councillor Stagg are talking about, it's really, really key, and we're doing an awful lot of work with the voluntary and community sector about making sure these people aren't socially isolated. And the sector are there. We're doing cross-statutory partner work with the CCG, adult social care, at the moment, where we are kind of co-designing businesses. We've got the social prescribing programme, which we've just put in a bid, which we're waiting to hear from the Department of Health for, which will be a significant programme, which is just about putting community around people so that they have independence in their own home and not just for a prescribed one time a week journey. So actually, it's really, really important to us that we are reaching these people, but that list was not passed over to us. If they are happy to pass it to us now, or alternatively, send out stuff on our behalf, but obviously we would rather they get the permission that we can then get our colleagues in the voluntary sector to go out and speak to them. Be more than happy to do that. I mean, this survey didn't just go to Portsmouth Disability Forum and Age UK, and obviously what we did with the people, the places where we knew the historic Pompey dial-a-ride had gone to, we contacted all of those agencies and community centres and told them to tell all of their users to contact us. Okay, so that was put in place in the first place. So obviously, at the moment, whilst we're down to approximately 10, 11 clients who are actually using the service, it was a lot more than that initially when we took over the service in June, when Traffic and Transport took over the service in June. So, you know, my plea would be, in all honesty, if the previous incumbent of the Pompey dial-a-ride service still has that list, one, I would challenge that and suggest that they might want to look at their own data protection and GDPR rules, but equally I would also say that list should be passed over to us so that we can actually work intensively with these people, because that's what we want to do.
It's a bit frustrating then that when we took it back in-house for a variety of reasons, that we requested that information, agreed to do all the data protection work, and what you're saying is effectively finance it all, and it wasn't forthcoming, which seems, which, to be completely blunt, who's letting down who under those circumstances? Because, as you say, Lynn, if they're vulnerable users, then I would have thought the previous operator would have been enthusiastic about making that information available so that we could capture all of it. I'd also like to go on record and say it is a thorough report, thank you very much. And also my thanks to the Portsmouth Disability Forum and Age UK Portsmouth, who I've met with, and they've done some sterling work on this. And actually, I think one of the things and one of the reasons why the users have actually dropped off is because of the work of those two organisations. The previous users of the assisted traffic passenger traffic system, I can never get it, APTS, is it? That's it. Have found that there are viable alternatives, because the way things have improved around the city, that actually in some instances meet their needs a lot better than the previous dial-a-ride or whatever guise it was in actually met then.
That's not what they've found when they've contacted people.
But with respect, Lynn, that's what dial-a-ride is saying. That's what Pompey dial-a-ride is saying to you. It's a shame that they haven't passed that list over to Lou and Age UK so that we could have carried out and spoken to those people. If we don't have that list of users, then it's very difficult to actually engage with them. And I think the onus lies with the previous operator is to be able to provide that information in the first place if they want to be totally supportive of their customer base. But hey ho. Gina.
Can I just add about the dial-a-ride about health appointments? Dial-a-rides are not intended to take people to the doctors, to the hospitals, and that was not what it was designed for. The dial-a-ride was to take people shopping and get out. Patient transport is the route that people should be using to get to their health appointments.
Because there are a variety of other alternatives.
Yep.
One of the other questions I have, and I'm sort of looking at Pam this time, there's been some suggestion that the stringent criteria, or the criteria that we had, ruled out, and I've seen suggestions, a lot of users. Was that actually the case at all?
I'd have to find out the exact figure for you and I can come back to you with that, but certainly the eligibility criteria that was implemented was designed in such a way to ensure that we are targeting the people who are most in need, who would most find it difficult, who would find it most difficult to use alternative forms of transport. And we've looked at best practice across a number of local authorities, for example, Transport for London, in looking at what we could actually use as a coherent and standard eligibility criteria, so we would be treating everyone in exactly the same way. But no, as I say, I would have to find the exact number for you, but I'm not aware that it was a significant figure, no.
Excellent, thank you very much. Councillor Chowdhury, have you got any comments?
I'd just like to make
Yaya, press your...
thank you. I'd just like to make the comment, if it's possible to can take the full concentration from the Age UK on the relevant department to check that matter to before finalised.
You want the Age UK report shared?
Yeah.
I don't think that's too much of an issue, is it? No, we can make that available to you and Lynn as well as the other spokesman. That'll be fine. But it was thorough. They were. Was it Lynn? Lynn, the lady that came in. If you wanted to sit down with her and catch her out with a question, you're going to be there a very, very long time. She certainly did a very thorough job that I could tell. Fair play to her. She really was. Age UK Portsmouth.
Sorry, Lynn Rigby's from Portsmouth Disability Forum and Diane Sherlock from Age UK
That's it,
Portsmouth,
other way
the people
round,
that we
yeah.
work with. Apologies.
Yeah, the other way around. Okay, well, that report is effectively just for noting. So, duly noted. And Lynn, Gina, Lou, Gina, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. I'm sure that won't be the last of that. Right, next I have Casey West Southsea, and that's the residence parking scheme. Pam.
Thank you, Chair. This report brings the responses to the traffic regulation order proposal on reducing the free parking period within the KC West Southsea area from 3 hours to 2 hours, with the recommendation that the order is approved as advertised. The reasons for the proposal are outlined in paragraph 3.5 and include the desire to improve the availability of parking spaces for residents and also to improve efficiency in enforcement. The proposal relates to the residents' parking bays only. The alternative limited time parking and pay and display, which ends at 6 p.m, is unaffected by the proposal. Consultation was open for 3 weeks, and in addition to the statutory notice published in the news, notices were also displayed in each road, and a copy of the public notice was sent to all 4,500 properties within the KC zone. Despite this, only 37 comments were received in response to the consultation, as outlined in section 4.2 of the report. The majority of those responses were in favour of the proposal. Because of this and the efficiencies in enforcement that can be gained, the recommendation is to implement the proposal as advertised.
Lynn, Yaya, you have any comments?
I go for the recommendation.
Sorry?
Yes, sir. I go for the recommendation.
I was half expecting a review of a residence parking scheme to be something that might be highly contentious. but 4,500 properties, plus copies to local traders, and we got 37 responses, which by my dodgy maths is less than 1%. And if you actually look at it, it's probably 60%. You could argue that it's almost half of 1% are actually in favour of going from 2 hours down from 3 hours down to 2 hours. And even then, we had 3 that were from outside the zone at the same time. So, from my perspective, I think it's a pretty simple decision, and that we don't do this. It seems to me that the majority of people, if you can make that assumption, that chose not to reply because they're completely comfortable with the way that the zone is currently operating. Now, so the recommendation I've got here is that the City Council Residence Parking Amendment be implemented as advertised. My response to that is no, we leave it at the 3 hours that we currently have, because I really don't think that there's been sufficient response to warrant any decision to be made, to be quite honest. Okay. So that's a refusal of that recommendation, I think, is the interpretation
Just for the
of that.
record, there was one extra representation that's been circulated for the record.
One extra. Now that might sway the whole decision. Probably won't, actually. So we'll leave that one exactly as it is. Councillor Symes will be delighted. Okay, the next item on my agenda is Elkstone Road traffic calming up in Cosgrove. Pam?
Thank you, Chair. This report brings the results of the public consultation on the implementation of 3 speed cushions along Elkstone Road, with the recommendation to approve the implementation as proposed. Elkstone Road is a 20-mile-an-hour speed-limited road. However, it has not seen the reduction in speed that was anticipated. The proposed traffic calming scheme would seek to address this issue of non-compliance within this area. A postal consultation was carried out with the residents in autumn 2017, and as outlined in section 3.4, from the 156 letters that were distributed, 27 responses were received, 20 of which were in support of the implementation of option 1. Because of the wider benefits that the scheme will deliver in terms of compliance with the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the fact that the majority of residents were in favour, it is recommended that option 1 is implemented as set out in the recommendations.
Lynn, Yaya, any comments to make?
Yes, I think it is as much as possible low speed will be better for the, as much as possible low speed will be better for the residents.
Certainly, from my aspect, it's one of those roads up in Portsmouth that tends to be a perennial bugbear, as a bit of a racetrack down towards the green. And on the basis that the majority are actually looking forward to it, I'm quite happy to agree the recommendation that we actually go forward and put the speed calming in there. I noticed the fact that neither the police nor First, who have the significant bus routes up there, have actually got no issues with that in any shape or form, which
That's
obviously
correct.
is useful to note as well. But we do seem to have a better response than we did to the previous item, and on that basis we will go forward and agree the recommendation. Thank you. I think, is that it? That is it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and look forward to seeing you next time, as they say. Smile sweetly on camera before they press the stop button.